Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too oppose the nomination of Andrew Hurwitz based on concerns I have with his constitutional jurisprudence. As several of my colleagues have mentioned, he has a 2002 New York Law School Law Review article in which he, in effect, took credit for helping to develop the legal architecture underlying what became Roe versus Wade. I know there's been some dispute as to whether he did that, but I've carefully examined footnote 55 and the accompanying text in that law review article, and that's how I read it. He was serving, of course, as a law clerk to then Judge Newman, who he asserts played an important role in developing that legal framework. Now, far from deflecting the credit for this opinion as a law clerk, which he was at the time, as I believe any former law clerk should when referring to an opinion in this circumstance, Mr. Hurwitz recounted that in a subsequent interview for a subsequent clerkship with Justice Potter Stewart at the Supreme Court. The Justice had jokingly referred to him as the clerk who wrote the Newman opinion. Mr. Hurwitz has asserted that his law review article was descriptive and did not express his personal opinion on the merits of Roe versus Wade. But to anyone who's reviewed the Hurwitz article and the laudatory tone with which it discusses that Supreme Court opinion, this response is simply not credible. It can't be reconciled with the law review article itself. Hurwitz specifically praised Judge Newman's careful and meticulous analysis of the constitutional issues, calling that analysis striking, even with the hindsight of 30 years. Now, Mr. Hurwitz simply can't have it both ways. He can't, on the one hand, seek credit for his role in developing jurisprudence that is at once completely unmoored from the text and history of the Constitution and that has fundamentally disrespected human life, and then at the same time later claim that he was only retelling a story as a neutral, objective, outside observer. There is growing consensus among legal experts and scholars, both conservative and liberal, that Roe was a deficient opinion that lacks any real legitimate legal reasoning in support of the holding reached in that case. So Mr. Hurwitz's willful failure to recognize the grave deficiencies in Roe, and indeed his self-promotion for playing a part in such an unfortunate event in this country's history, casts an unacceptable degree of doubt on his capability to serve in the role of a federal appellate judge in the Ninth Circuit. Prior to President Obama's unconstitutional recess appointments, I gave President Obama's judicial nominees great deference. Both in Judiciary Committee and on the Senate floor, I voted in favor of the vast majority of the President's nominees, including many with whom I have fundamental disagreements. But I can do so no more. There is and must be a new standard for this President's nominations, and a standard under which a problematic and controversial nominee like Mr. Hurwitz cannot and will not in this circumstance receive my vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.